And obviously, this is a good politics idea in the sense that Canada is facing a threat to our sovereignty and our economy from the United States, but we are also dealing with inflation.
Mark Carney was in New Brunswick today to highlight the plan. He says it will help boost Canada's economy and insulate it from Donald Trump's tariffs.
The Canadian government has rightly retaliated and is rightly retaliating with our own tariffs that will have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impact here in Canada.
Something changed in a way that felt immediately clear the instant it unfolded. It didn't come through loud build-up or dramatic signals, but through a steady and controlled message that carried far more weight than its tone suggested. When Mark Carney stepped forward and delivered his remarks, the impact came from how straightforward and grounded it felt. It was almost as if an entire country was being asked to reflect and decide what comes next in a rapidly shifting world. That pressure had been building gradually, influenced in part by the policies and posture of Donald Trump. The result was a speech that didn't feel like routine politics. It felt like a defining moment. The real story didn't start in that room because the groundwork had already been forming quietly in everyday life. Small decisions began reflecting something larger than personal choice. Over time, those decisions started aligning into a visible trend. People chose wine from the Okanagan instead of bottled from California, while casual conversations turned into subtle rejections of American bourbon, and families rethought travel plans by choosing destinations like Prince Edward Island instead of heading to Florida. These choices may seem small, but together they point toward a deeper national shift. The data behind those decisions tells a story that becomes hard to ignore once it's clearly seen. Canada experienced a record tourism season that reflected this behavioral change nationwide. There was a 13% increase in visits to national parks and a 15% rise in attendance at national museums. More than 50,000 additional train trips were recorded, showing renewed interest in domestic exploration. These figures did not appear by chance. They represent a consistent and widespread shift in how Canadians are thinking and spending. That shift became central to Carney's message, and the way he presented it made it clear this is not just a temporary reaction. The global environment itself is evolving at a pace that leaves little room for delay or hesitation. He described this transformation as a rupture reshaping economic systems, alliances, and expectations all at once. That wording matters because it signals urgency rather than gradual change. It also reflects a reality that long-standing systems are no longer as stable as they once appeared. Canada's position within that evolving system adds another layer of complexity. Nearly 75% of Canadian exports have historically gone to the United States, creating a level of dependence that once felt reliable. That concentration now appears increasingly risky in a climate shaped by tariffs and shifting priorities. Industries like aluminum, steel, and lumber sit at the center of this exposure. These sectors have already felt the effects of policies introduced during Trump's administration. Carney addressed that reality directly, without softening the message, and his words carried significant economic implications. He pointed to defense spending and noted that the long-standing pattern of Canada sending roughly 70 cents of every military dollar to the United States is ending. That statement goes beyond symbolism because redirecting even part of that spending could channel billions into Canadian industries. It could strengthen domestic supply chains and support local manufacturing in meaningful ways. Over time, this kind of adjustment could reduce reliance on external partners. The speech repeatedly returned to the idea that change is already happening at the ground level. Carney used examples of consumer behavior to show that Canadians themselves have started driving this transformation. When millions of people make similar decisions at the same time, the cumulative effect becomes measurable. Choosing local goods, supporting domestic travel, and adjusting spending habits all contribute to this shift. These actions send economic signals that ripple across multiple sectors. Canada's tourism data offers one of the clearest examples of this process in motion. Increased domestic travel spending has helped stabilize the sector during uncertain periods. The 13% and 15% growth figures, along with a rise in train travel, reflect more than short-term trends. They suggest Canadians are rediscovering their own country in a meaningful way. This supports Carney's broader argument that resilience begins at the individual level. The tone of the speech shifted as it moved into more personal territory, adding emotional depth to the message. Carney spoke about moments when Canadians came together during times of crisis. He described how first responders arrived quickly, how teachers stepped in to protect students, and how individuals like Jim Caruso traveled over 1,000 kilometers to support grieving families. These examples grounded the message in real human experience. These moments were presented not as isolated events, but as reflections of a broader national character. They highlighted a shared strength that extends beyond policy or economics. Carney linked this sense of unity to the country's ability to navigate larger challenges. The same spirit that drives compassion during difficult times can also drive transformation at a national level. This connection reinforced the idea that Canada's strength lies in its people. As the speech moved into its most direct phase, the focus shifted towards sovereignty and external pressure. Trump's approach to trade and global relations has included tariffs and rhetoric that challenge long-standing assumptions. Carney responded by emphasizing that this is not a time for division or short-term political tactics. He framed it as a moment that requires unity and clarity in defining Canada's future path. The message was firm and left little room for uncertainty. He also stressed the urgency of acting in a rapidly evolving world shaped by technological change. Artificial intelligence represents a major turning point, with projections suggesting it could add up to $15.7 trillion to the global economy by 2030. That level of transformation demands active participation rather than passive observation. Carney made it clear that Canada must choose whether to help shape this future or adapt to decisions made elsewhere. This reinforced the theme of control and direction. The economic implications of this shift extend into trade and industrial strategy. Reducing dependence on the United States does not mean cutting ties completely. It involves recalibrating relationships and expanding trade partnerships. Canada has already taken steps through agreements with Europe and the Asia-Pacific region. These moves aim to build a more balanced and resilient economic structure. Carney's emphasis on building with Canadian steel, aluminum, lumber, and workers reflects this strategy clearly. These are sectors where Canada holds strong capabilities and significant resources. Expanding domestic use can strengthen supply chains and reduce exposure to external shocks. It also creates opportunities for employment and regional growth. This approach aligns economic policy with national priorities. What stands out across the speech is how multiple trends come together to support a single narrative. Consumer behavior, economic data, and global developments all point in the same direction. They suggest Canada is entering a new phase defined by independence and self-direction. Carney captured this moment without exaggeration or reducing it to simple slogans. The message stayed grounded in observable reality. As the speech moved toward its conclusion, the focus returned to people and their role in shaping the future. Canada has always been built by individuals making decisions that go beyond immediate needs. This moment follows that same pattern in a different context. The choices being made now will shape the country's direction for years ahead. That idea ties the entire message together. The closing carried a sense of momentum rather than finality. It suggested this is an ongoing process rather than a completed shift. Questions remain about how far these changes will go and how they will unfold. Transforming economic relationships requires consistency and long-term planning. These factors will ultimately determine the outcome. This moment reflects both external pressure and internal developments that have been building over time. Trump's policies played a role, but they are only part of a broader picture. Carney's speech brought these elements together into a clear narrative. It emphasized direction, purpose, and the need for decisive action. That clarity helped the message resonate. The path forward includes challenges that require careful handling. Reducing reliance on a major trading partner involves balancing risk and opportunity. It also requires investment, infrastructure, and sustained public support. These elements take time to develop and maintain. Success will depend on how effectively they come together. Even with those challenges, the speech defined the moment with unusual clarity. It presented a vision of Canada that is more confident and more self-reliant. At the same time, it acknowledged the interconnected nature of global economies. This balance is essential for long-term success. It reflects a practical approach to independence. This leaves several important questions moving forward. If Canada continues along this path, the effect will be felt across multiple sectors. Trade, industry, and international relations will all be influenced. The scale of change will depend on how consistently this vision is followed. That uncertainty keeps the conversation open. If this momentum continues, the next phase will depend on execution and public response. Policies must align with the direction outlined in the speech. Canadians themselves will play a central role through their choices. The future will be shaped by both leadership and collective action. That dynamic will define what comes next. And as this story continues to unfold, the stakes will only rise with each step forward. Where does this shift ultimately take Canada in a world that is changing faster than ever? How far is the country willing to go in redefining its global position? And what does this mean for its relationship with the United States moving ahead? If this kind of analysis keeps you thinking, then staying engaged with these conversations matters because the story is still developing, and the next chapter could reshape more than anyone expects.